character whose name is Colin Clout. Spencer himself is Colin Clout, represents Colin Clout, and he talks about his love. His love is Rosalind. But the tragedy is the love is unfulfilled love, unrequited love, for which he is not able to fulfill his love. When it is not fulfilled, the poet is, unhappy. The poet is upset. He loved Rosalind, but Rosalind did not respond. Their love did not materialize in marriage. So this is about the first eclogue, which refers to January. So the month of January, the first eclogue deals with a kind of complaint. Okay, yeah, eclogue, ECLOGUE, absolutely right. Then comes the month of February. In the month of February, you find a fable, the depiction of a fable. It is a moral tale of the oak and the briar. And this is a tale between oak and a briar, which is giving a warning against pride, arrogance, ambition. How pride, arrogance, ambition end up in tragedy. As you have found in Chanticleer, you have found in Fox Russell yesterday while dealing with non-priest's tale. And the third eclogue is March, which is a reverence of tradition. In the third eclogue, the poet pays reverence, pays respect to Queen Elizabeth, and she calls Queen Elizabeth as Elisa, Elisa. Then comes the fourth eclogue, that is in the month of April. Fourth eclogue refers to the month of April, where he is fully, in a full-throated voice, he is showering praise on Elizabeth. And this eclogue, that is fourth eclogue, is a more courtly poem. हाँ देवेदेव हाँ आमर मोर चाली क्लास आरंभ हेलानी हाँ ठीक है. The fourth eclogue refers to the month of April. In the month of April, what happens? The poet Edmund Spenser is praising the dynamism of Elizabeth, the beauty of Elizabeth, the presentability of Elizabeth, the virtues of Elizabeth, the good qualities of Elizabeth, the magnanimity of Elizabeth, the generosity of Elizabeth, the charisma of Elizabeth. So he is full of praise. Spenser is full of praise for Queen Elizabeth. Then comes the month of May in the fifth eclogue. In the fifth eclogue, he talks about or focuses on a religious satire. How does the religious satire come? It comes through the argument, the debate between the shepherds. The shepherds are criticizing the corrupt practices in the court. In the church, in the British church or in the church in Britain, there used to be rampant corruption, high level corruption. And that corruption is being exposed and being criticized by the people belonging to the lower rung of society, the people who live in a pastoral background, the shepherds. The shepherds are very critical of the religious hierarchy, the clergymen indulging in corruption in British church. So they are not prepared to tolerate this kind of corruption, which is very much prevalent in British church, for which they become vocal. And they satirize, they criticize the kind of corruption that is going on in Church of England. Then comes the June, which is also a debate, and this debate hinges around or moves around Colin's love's miseries, the contest between shepherds, Hobinal and Tomalin. So this is a kind of satire also, a debate also, where Colin, the protagonist, who has failed in his love with Rosalind, he has been talking about his miserable life, how he is a failure in the field of love. So he is describing it to his fellow shepherds. Who are his friends? The fellow shepherds, Hobinal and Tomalin. So he is describing his awful experience, his miserable experience, his nightmarish experience with love to his friend Hobinal and Tamalin. When you are having some problem, if you share it with your friend, your heart gets relieved. That's why uh, that's why the people are they are listening, and Colin is describing about his failure in love, how he has been betrayed in love by Rosalind. Rosalind didn't come out with a positive response, and he got disappointed. Actually, he intended to marry Rosalind. Colin intended to marry Rosalind, but Rosalind did not respond positively, for which Colin is disappointed, and the same disappointment he is going to share with his friends, his most close friends like Hobinal and Tomalin. Then comes the seventh eclogue. In the seventh eclogue, we find the fable of governance, the fable of the kid and the fox, moral on governance and deceit. So this eclogue deals with a kid as well as the fox, and there some kind of moral lessons are given, moral lessons about governance and deceit. If you become deceitful, what would happen? Unless you govern properly, what would be your predicament? That is being highlighted here, and this is called a fable of governance. So, in the seventh eclogue, he has highlighted on governance. Then, in the eighth eclogue, he arranges for a song competition. And the eighth eclogue, which refers to the month of August. Each eclogue refers to a particular month of the year, and eighth eclogue obviously refers to the month of August. And there he is celebrating a kind of contest, say a song competition. He is organizing a song competition where the song will glorify the beauty of nature. All the songs which are invited for the competition or approved for the competition, they will sing about the glory of nature, the beauty of nature. The magnificent beauty of nature is being dealt with in this song competition. And all the participants, they will present their songs relating to the beauty of nature. Then comes this ninth eclogue, which refers to the month of September, where you find the kind of a state of melancholy, pastoral melancholy. Melancholy means sorrow, sadness. Digan Davy laments moral decay in the clergy. So those shepherds, they were also discussing about the corruption among the clergymen in the church. Here, another person, another shepherd named Digan Davy, he is also lamenting about the moral decay, the moral degeneration that has happened in the British church. In the British church, how the religious hierarchy has succumbed to corruption, and the clergy are indulging in large scale corruption. That is being highlighted here. Next comes your 10th eclogue, which refers to or responds to or corresponds to the month of October. So there you find a discussion is made on art and state patronage. How art should be patronized by state, that is being focused by Colin. Colin, who is supposed to be the protagonist, the hero, he is highlighting a state should take up poetry, art, culture, architecture, sculpture, and all those things, even patronize the poets. Court or the state, the king should patronize poetry and the poets, so that people will feel that art is being patronized by the administration. Then comes the 11th eclogue, which refers to November, the month of November. There an elegy is presented. In the elegy, there is lament for Dido. Dido is representing Lady Sydney, possibly allegorical. So, in the elegy, there is a lament for Dido. Dido's demise is being lamented about in the 11th eclogue. Then comes the 12th eclogue, that refers to December, where you find there is a mood of resignation. In the 12th eclogue, or the last eclogue, there is a mood of resignation where Colin is bidding farewell to love and retreating from the worldly affairs. So Colin is disappointed. Colin is disillusioned with love, and he says, "Bye bye, love. No more am I interested to dabble in the field of love. Whatever I have got, that is enough, and I am no more interested to make love." That is why he is bidding farewell and going away from worldly affairs. So here you find in this Shepherd's calendar, Spencer uses old-fashioned language. Why does he use old-fashioned language? He uses old-fashioned language to evoke a nostalgic charm for the element of medievalism. And he wants to align himself with Chaucer's tradition. He is a great admirer of Chaucer. When he is a uh, uh, no, there is going to be disturbance. For that reason, I have switched off my video. I have switched off my video because there is disturbance in the internet. That's why only audio is open. Okay. It is from your suggestion only. Some of you suggested and I did that. And here you find there is variety of form, different meters, styles in each eclogue keep the work dynamic. There are songs, there are fables, presentation of debate, there is lamentation. So here, this poem, The Shepherd's Calendar, deals with the themes of love, variety of themes. It deals with a variety of themes. Remember, the poem Shepherd's Calendar, which is a pastoral poem and which comprises 12 eclogues. It deals with different kinds of themes like love, religion, politics, allegory, art, patronage, moral philosophy, etc. So here you find this is how things are going on, and this is a wonderful poem, a brilliant poem where you find this kind of thing is happening. We'll move on to the Fairy Queen. Next poem is The Fairy Queen. The Fairy Queen is divided into 6 books. The Fairy Queen was originally intended to be an ambitious epic. Spencer intended to write a national epic for which he started The Fairy Queen. Initially, he intended to complete the Fairy Queen or to cover the Fairy Queen, the subject matter of Fairy Queen, in 12 books, but he could not write 6 more books. It was confined to only 6 books. In book 1, he deals with the legend of the Knight of the Red Cross. The first book focuses on the Knight of the Red Cross, means each book represents one virtue. So this is a brilliant poem where you find various kinds of virtues are dealt with in every book. There are 6 books, 6 types of virtues are being delineated here, presented here. Now the first book deals with holiness. Okay. Second book deals with temperance. Third book deals with chastity. Fourth book deals with friendship. Fifth book deals with justice. And sixth book deals with courtesy. So you can make out what kind of design, what kind of plan the wonderful poet, the renowned poet Edmund Spenser had while writing The Fairy Queen. So The Fairy Queen is a brilliant epic. It is an epic and it is also an allegorical poem which is dedicated to Queen Elizabeth I. So he is a great supporter of Queen Elizabeth I. This was intended as a sequence of 12 books, but he could not complete 12 books. Only 6 books were completed. And here Each book narrates the quest of a knight representing a moral virtue. Each knight in every book is going in quest of a human virtue. With the fairy queen or Gloriana symbolizing Elizabeth and idealized virtue as the central unifying figure. This poem, Fairy Queen, is written in Spenserian stanza, 9 lines, 8 iambic pentameters, and 1 Alexandrine. The purpose of this poem is to fashion a gentleman in virtuous and gentle discipline. The aim of this poem is to tender moral wisdom, moral counsel, and the setting of the poem is a fairy land, an imaginative symbolic landscape blending Arthurian romance, classical epic, and Renaissance humanism. So, as you open the first book, as you study the first book, you come across the holiness of Red Cross Knight. The knight or the Red Cross Knight is a holy man and he espouses, champions the cause of holiness. He encounters error. Archimago, Duesa, they indulge in falsehood. Trials symbolize the Christian spiritual journey from sin to salvation. Trial also takes place in this book, which symbolizes that the Christians are making a spiritual journey from the state of sin to the state of salvation. And finally, the book 1 ends with victory over the dragon and betrothal to Una. So, Red Cross Knight finally succeeds in marrying Una. Una was imprisoned by the dragon, and somehow or other, Red Cross Knight succeeds in defeating the dragon, killing the dragon, and marrying Una. Then comes book 2. In book 2, you come across a character, Sir Guyon. Sir Guyon represents temperance, moderation, patience, tolerance, gentleness. Guyon's quest against excess and self-indulgence. He travels through the cave of Mammon. Who? Guyon. The bower of bliss. See, he symbolizes balance between passion and reason. So, Sir Guyon represents temperance. I told you, each book in the Fairy Queen represents one human virtue. The first book represented the virtue of holiness in Red Cross Knight, and the second book represents the virtue of temperance, and the main character here in the second book is Sir Guyon. Sir Guyon makes a travel through the cave of Mammon, and it was a bower of bliss where he has maintained the balance between passion and reason. He had the passion to travel, but while traveling, he has maintained his reason properly, his honesty, his virtue properly. Then comes book 3. Book 3 represents the human virtue of chastity. Here, chastity is represented by Britomat. Britomat is a female knight who represents chastity in action. She seeks her destined husband, Artegall. Britomat wants to seek her husband. Her husband's name is Artegall, Artegall. She encounters and reveals that chastity is not repression, but faithful love. So Britomat finally becomes successful to find out her husband, Artegall, and both of them are united. Like in book 1, Red Cross Rose and Una, they were united. Similarly, in book 3, Britomat and Artegall, they got united. Then in book 4, we find the virtue of friendship. This book explores the bonds of loyalty, marriage, and brotherhood. This includes tournaments, reconciliations, and allegories of friendship. So book 4 represents the friendship between Campbell and Trimond. Two characters are there. One is Campbell, the other is Trimond. Both are good friends and they set examples of friendship. Then comes your book 5. In the book 5, we find the representation of justice. Justice is displayed. Justice is a human virtue. The human virtue of justice is displayed in this book. Article guided by tellers enforces justice. So, Article, who married Britomat, he enforced justice, and this book depicts trials, legal reform, punishment of wrongdoers. Whosoever gives, indulges in injustice, wrong things, wrong works, he is punished by Article. And this book includes allegories of contemporary political events. Then comes Book 6, which represents courtesy. Courtesy is a human virtue, which is represented by the character Sir Calidore. Sir Calidore combats the blatant beast, slander. Courtesy is shown as a noble behavior and moral grace. So, in the final book, or Book 6, we find the representation of human virtue, courtesy, through the character of Sir Calidore. And here we find also the 7th book, which is half finished. Now let's make a critical analysis of the book The Fairy Queen. You find that the book deals with several categories of themes, and especially the theme centers around allegory. There is religious allegory. Red Cross is a Protestant Christian. Una represents truth, and she is from Anglican Church. Duesa represents falsehood. She is from Catholic Church. So the contrast between Catholic Church and Protestant Church is revealed here. The Protestant Church is represented by Red Cross. Catholic Church is represented by Duesa. Duesa indulges in falsehood. And Anglican Church is represented by Una. Anglican Church is also truthful. Una is very truthful character. Then there is moral allegory. Each knight's journey represents the cultivation of a specific virtue. Then there is political allegory also. There is moral allegory, religious allegory, and political allegory. As far as political allegory is concerned, Spencer has portrayed Gloriana as Elizabeth I. Or in other words, just reverse it. Elizabeth I is portrayed as Gloriana, and she represents what? She represents virtue. She represents, good ruling, good administration, and good authority. And Spencer has made use of Spencerian stanza. He has made use of Chaucer's language, medieval language, archaic language. The imagery refer to visual landscapes. And here in this poem also you find the philosophical and moral vision. Spencer combines Christian humanism with Renaissance moral philosophy. Each knight's imperfection shows virtue as a process of growth. So you find this is a wonderful poem, a brilliant poem, where you find book by book analysis, and each book presents a kind of human virtue, and certain characters are there who are exposed. Characters like Duesa, who indulges in falsehood. Characters like Archimago, who is a deceptive person, who is a hypocrite. And there are good characters like Red Cross, Una, Duesa. They are all good characters. Now we will switch over to metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry. What do you mean by metaphysical poetry? First of all, let's know what is metaphysical poetry. Metaphysical poetry actually refers to a style of writing poetry in the 17th century England, which was a different kind of poetry. Why it was different? It was different because it revealed intellectual complexity, philosophical
Excuse me, sir.
depth. Yeah.
So what about epithalamion and prothalamion? You're not going
Epithalamian,
to
acha, epithalamian amority. Okay, okay. We'll do that. Yes, you
yes,
are
sir,
right.
they are left.
Okay, okay. We'll do that because we are vast courses like so that I'm in a hurry.
It's
Okay,
very
okay.
important topic, so I just thought maybe I
No,
should
no,
let.
you are right. You are right. Amority and epithalamium. You are right. So this is a sonnet sequence. Amority and epithalamium, they are back to back two sonnets. It is published in 1595. Amority as a sonnet was published in 1595 and it comprised 89 sonnets, followed by the marriage and hymn epithalamion. Epithalamion is a hymn and Amority is a sonnet which celebrates marriage. And prothalamion is a marriage song. This is one of the few Elizabethan sonnet sequences that celebrate a successful courtship leading to marriage. It is a very successful courtship and it leads to marriage. As you find unrequited love between, Colin and Rosalind, this is not unrequited love. In Shepherd's calendar, Colin was disappointed in his love towards Rosalind. But here it is different. Here, Amority celebrates the success of love. Here, uh, Spencer discusses the courtship of Elizabeth Boyle. Unlike the Petrarchan sonnets, Spencer dwells on not on
Good evening, sir.
unfulfilled love. In Petrarchan sonnet, you find the celebration of unfulfilled love. But here, he has talked about the fulfillment in love. That is the difference. In Petrarchan sonnets, you find the themes of unfulfilled, unrequited love. But in Spencer's poetry, you find the themes of accomplished love, successful love. And Amority is accompanied by epithalamion, which commemorates their wedding day. The structure is Spenserian stanza. You know Spenserian stanza? 8 lines, iambic pentameters, and the last line is an Alexandrine or hexameter. Themes evolve from admiration, struggle against indifference, spiritual love, triumph in marriage. So the themes of spiritual love are also celebrated here. Love is immortal, love is eternal, love is perennial, love is platonic, love is enduring, love is abiding, love is transcendental. That is being discussed here. There is also focus on virtue and patience. There is also religious undertone as well. You find love mirrors divine order and harmony, and there is imagery of nature. What kind of imagery? Imagery is drawn from nature. For example, the natural landscapes, flowers, spring season, all those things are referred to. So, in Sonnet 1, it is introduced the sequence. The poet hopes his beloved will read these lines. And he compares love to divine worship. The poet also presents love as a drama and the metaphor of stage is used. So love is immortalized here. So this is one of the rarest Elizabethan poems dealing with the success of love. Okay. So this is what is Amority. So Amority is a sonnet sequence which focuses on the success of love, unlike the sonnets of Petrarch. Petrarchan love. Petrarchan love ends in failure. Lover and beloved, they don't get united. But here in Spencerian love, they get united. Especially in amority, we find how they are getting united. This is just the opposite of Petrarchan love. In Petrarchan love, there is failure. In Spencerian love, there is success. So Epithalamion, we'll switch over to Epithalamion. It was published in 1595 as well, along with Amority. It's a marriage hymn written for the wedding day. So Epithalamion is a marriage hymn or a marriage song. It was written for the wedding day of Elizabeth Boyle. It is a marriage hymn and written for on the wedding day of Elizabeth Boyle. It blends personal joy, the artistic exploration of Renaissance age, and the classical tradition. This poem, Epithalamion, is written as a companion to Amority, which narrates his courtship. It captures one single day. Epithalamion is written focusing on one single day, from dawn to dusk or night, celebrating their wedding, anticipating marital happiness. The title Epithalamion means wedding song. The meaning of Epithalamion is a wedding song. This has 12 stanzas. This is written in Spencerian stanza, and it starts with the invocation of the muse to inspire the song. Then it discusses the beauty of the bride, Elizabeth Boyle. The beauty of the bride is compared to roses, lilies, and dawn. Emphasis is put on the purity of the bride, the beauty of the bride, and it also focuses on the elements of nature like flowers, birds, rivers, fountains. It uses mythological figures. Some mythological figures are also drawn in. Mythological figures like Hymen, Juno, Phoebus. Then Christian harmony is also celebrated here. So the entire thing, as you analyze, the theme is love, and the love is transcendental love. Love is immortal love, platonic love, perennial love, enduring love, abiding love, successful love. Then we'll switch over to metaphysical poetry. So what is metaphysical poetry? As I was going to tell you, metaphysical poetry is a kind of poetry which is written in a different style compared to others. When it is written in a different style, it indicates the intellectual complexity, philosophical depth, and the inventive imagery. The imagery of metaphysical poets is definitely innovative and inventive.
Sir, can
There
you
is
please
philosophical. Sorry?
sir, can you please repeat? It is written in three things you said.
Yeah, three things. Absolutely. One is intellectual complexity. Write down. You have to write it down. Metaphysical poetry is known or recognized or appreciated or acclaimed, having three peculiar characteristics. The three peculiar characteristics are intellectual complexity, philosophical depth, inventive and innovative imagery. Inventive and innovative imagery. First is intellectual complexity, second is philosophical depth, and the third is inventive and innovative imagery. The term metaphysical. What do you mean by metaphysical? What is metaphysical? Meta means beyond. Physical means this physical world. So you are going to read such type of poetry which focuses on themes not relating to the physical world, material world, mundane world, but the world beyond. Meta means beyond. The term metaphysical was first applied by the eminent critic Samuel Johnson.
Henry Vaughan.
Samuel Johnson, not Henry Vaughan. Henry Vaughan is a metaphysical poet.
Yes.
Henry Vaughan is a metaphysical poet, but Samuel Johnson is a critic who called John Donne, George Herbert, Henry Vaughan, Richard Herrick, Andrew Marvell as metaphysical poets. So the term metaphysical was first applied by the critic, eminent critic Samuel Johnson. Of course, he used it in a pejorative way, used it in a sarcastic way. He wanted to dismiss the metaphysical poets by saying that they affect metaphysics. Johnson said they affect metaphysics. And who are the poets? The poets are John Donne, George Herbert, Andrew Marvell, Henry Vaughan, Richard Herrick, etc. Metaphysical poetry explores the themes beyond the physical world, I told you, such as love, religion, and death. Okay. And they make a blend of passion and intellect. There is a blending between passion and intellect. They use metaphysical concepts. They use metaphysical concepts and metaphysical wits. Metaphysical concept is unusual. It is a kind of extended metaphor linking seemingly unrelated ideas. For example, in a poem of John Donne, he has made a comparison of the lover and beloved with two foots of the compass, two legs of the compass. And he says, the beloved is the fixed foot and the lover is the moving foot. The beloved remains at one place, the lover moves around the beloved. In a poem called Valediction Forbidding Mourning. So this is something unusual. Nobody can imagine to make a comparison of lover and beloved with, the two feet of the compass. And there you find wit and paradox. Others, you mute yourself, mute your microphone, others. Wit and paradox. There are clever arguments and contradictory statements which are very thought-provoking. So you find wit and paradox. There is philosophical inquiry. The metaphysical poets make an inquiry into human existence. How does this world exist? How does this creation exist? What is the ontological significance of this universe? They try to explore God, immortality, human existence. The poems are found to open in an abrupt manner. The tone is very colloquial. There is fusion of emotional intensity with logical reasoning. They deal with the themes of love, religion and spirituality, death and immortality, time and transience. Remember, this is very important. What themes are dealt with by the metaphysical poets? the metaphysical poets deal with the themes of love, both physical love and spiritual love or platonic love. They deal with religion and spiritualism. They deal with death and immortality. And they also deal with time and transience. They understand that life is very short. Life is transient. Life is very short-lived. And in Andrew Marvell, in his poem To His Coy Mistress, he is imploring his beloved, please come and make love. Time is getting out of hand. So if you analyze the poem of George Herbert, The Pulley, which is an elegant example of metaphysical poetry, there you find richness of conceit. Metaphysical conceit is presented in abundance. There is religious symbolism and there is philosophical insight. So the poet has said, while creating a man, God poured out blessings. What did God do? God poured out blessings on human beings while making the human beings. God gave a human being strength, beauty, wisdom, honor, resilience, vivacity, devotion, tolerance, solidarity, pleasure. But he always wanted to keep man up and doing, keeping him busy always. So God denied man one element, that is rest. The rest is denied to man, but man is given everything except rest. That is what Pulley describes. George Herbert describes through the poem The Pulley. And the reason is, if a man had rest, he would worship the God gifts rather than God. If he is given rest, he will always worship his material pursuits. He will run after material pursuits. He will never talk about God. But when he is restless, at that time he is telling, oh God, save me. Oh God, how compassionate you are. How benevolent you are. By withholding rest, man would eventually grow weary of worldly pursuits and rest in the lap of God. That is the original concept, the original idea of Herbert. Herbert wanted that man should be denied rest so that he will remember God. So in this poem, The Pulley, Herbert talks about spiritualism and focuses on man's connection with God. So God has kept human beings under control. How does he control human beings? He has given human being everything except rest, so that he would get a chance to remember God. So now we will switch over to Milton, poet Milton. Milton belongs to the 17th century and last part of 16th century. He is one of the greatest poets of English literature. Yesterday we are discussing about his epics, The Paradise Lost and The Paradise Regained. And do you know, Milton turned blind towards his latter part of life. Milton was deeply educated in Latin, Greek, Hebrew, and Italian traditions, and his works reflected uh, the Puritan faith, Protestant morality, as well as divine justice. He was a master of blank verse. Blank verses are unrhymed verses written in iambic pentameters. He writes also lyrical poetry. His lyrical poetry, you can find L'Allegro, Il Penseroso, Lycidas, these are the lyrics. So out of the different poetic forms, he writes two types of poems. One is lyric, the other is epic. So he deals with the themes of freedom, virtue, divine providence, as well as human responsibility. If you come to his poem L'Allegro, one of the brilliant lyrics, which is written in octosyllabic couplets, octosyllabic 8 syllables. Each line contains 8 syllables. And it is a pastoral lyric. What is a pastoral lyric? It is written about the glories of nature. And there is musical rhythm. It celebrates the theme of happiness in a rural setting. How in a rural area you get all kinds of happiness. You find all kinds of happiness in a rural area. The happiness you find in rural area is never found in urban area. That is what he wanted to tell you. The imagery is used from diverse sections, like the imagery of morning scene, imagery of dance, imagery of festival, imagery of the brightness of nature, imagery of festivals are given here. The tone of the poem is very strong, joyful, and it invokes mirth and laughter. This is a brilliant poem. So L'Allegro means, the literal meaning of L'Allegro is the cheerful man. The literal dictionary meaning of L'Allegro is the cheerful man. So Milton has portrayed what is the joy in human life and how joy is invoked in human life in a rural setting. In a rural setting, you always find there is joy. But in a urban setting, there is less of joy, more of sorrow. Then is our next poem, Il Penseroso. Il Penseroso is equally a brilliant poem, a very magnificent poem. The meaning of Il Penseroso is the thoughtful man. The meaning of L'Allegro is the cheerful man. And the meaning of Il Penseroso is the thoughtful man. The metrical form used here is octosyllabic couplets, like that of L'Allegro. And the imagery referred to night scenes, scenes at night, lamplight, musical instrument, cloistered walks, meditation, calmness. These are the themes and these are the imageries portrayed in the poem Il Penseroso. Here you find that L'Allegro is showing Milton's balance between mirth and thought. If you compare L'Allegro with Il Penseroso, you come to an insightful conclusion that first of all, Milton has talked about mirth, laughter, enjoyment, entertainment, joy, And later on, in Il Penseroso, he has made man thoughtful, to think about the purpose of life, to think over the purpose of life. Then there is another poem, Lycidas. Lycidas is written by John Milton in 1637, and this is an elegy. You know what is an elegy? Elegy is a poem written in commemoration of some near and dear ones who has passed away, who has died. So this elegy is a pastoral elegy. This elegy is a pastoral elegy celebrating the beautiful manifestations of nature. This is written on the death of Edward King. Edward King happens to be the friend of Milton in Cambridge University. When Milton was studying in Cambridge University, he had a friend whose name is Edward King, and he died being drowned in the sea. After he died being drowned in the sea, Milton wrote this elegy, Lycidas. This pastoral elegy, Lycidas, blends classical conventions with Christian theology. You find two aspects here, classical convention, and there is also Christian theology. The rhyme scheme is irregular, and the theme of grief, loss, separation, alienation, estrangement, untimely death of a young poet is used here. The theme of grief and loss is displayed in the poem Lycidas. Then the poet Milton has also talked about the immortality of a poet. Milton has said, a poet can never die. The material body of the poet, the physical body of the poet may die, but he himself cannot die. His poetic talent cannot die. Edward King was a poet, and he has died, but his poetry can never die. People remember his talent, poetic vision. Then there is religious reflection. Milton has made reference to the corruption that is prevalent in the church and how the clergies have fallen a victim to corruption. And finally, he has also assured that divine justice will always prevail. Divine justice will always prevail and take to task all those corrupt people. Obviously, the tone of the poem is very sorrowful, and it ends with resurrection and immortality. The poet hopes that Edward King has remained immortal. Edward King has resurrected himself. He has never died. Because a poet can never die. A poet is immortal. The physical body of the poet may die, but the talent, the poetic talent, can never die. So we will switch over to the neoclassical poets, Dryden and Pope. Before we switch over to neoclassical poets, I must give you the background of neoclassical age. Neoclassical age occurred in 18th century. And you know, in the 17th century, there was Milton, there were metaphysical poets. Prior to them, there was Edmund Spenser, Sir Philip Sidney, William Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, all those poets were there. But in the 18th century, neoclassical age or Augustan age, what happened? Two poets, two very renowned poets appeared on the poetic firmament. One is John Dryden and the other is Alexander Pope. କିଛି ନାହିଁ ଆଉ ସେଟା ନବ. So John Dryden and Alexander Pope, both of them, they were very close, and they used to focus on the urban lifestyle. They are not interested in bringing out the nitty-gritty of rural life. They never show any interest on depiction of nature in their poetry. So what they used to do, they used to focus on the urban lifestyle, and their poetry is called coffee house poetry, because they never used to be very particular about the depiction of rural poetry or rural landscape, rustic landscape, the flora and fauna, the scenic and picturesque beauty of nature. They never depicted it. That is why their poetry was not very much liked by the people of England. I have told you, the people of England used to be very aesthetic. They used to be very, particular about the charm, the significance, the moral aspect, the aesthetic aspect of literature. And they did another thing. Dryden and Pope, they wrote poetry in heroic couplets. There are two things in poetry. One is form, the other is technique. The one is form, the other is content. One is theme, the other is technique. So they put more emphasis on technique and neglected the theme. As I told you, they focused on the theme of urban people, urban lifestyle, urban, society, but neglected rural landscape, rural society, rustic people, the sorrows and sufferings, the struggle, the challenges faced by the rustic people. It was totally neglected. And they put more emphasis on the technique. They wanted to achieve technical perfection by writing their poetry through heroic couplets. The other day I have explained to you what is a heroic couplet. Heroic couplet comprises two lines of iambic pentameters. Iamb is a short syllable followed by a long syllable. Pentameter means 10 syllables. So short, long, short, long, short, long. And the two lines must rhyme with each other. So when they focused on the technical aspect, the thematic aspect was neglected. And they did another thing. There was another weak point which goes against them. That is, they were, writing satires. They were very suspicious of others, especially Alexander Pope. He used to write satires most of the times. Satires used to expose the follies and foibles of the people, the weaknesses and inadequacies of the people, for which people were not very happy with them, because they were not very serious in poetry. They were personally revengeful, and they were writing satires. Their style of writing was, of course, through heroic couplets, but then it was sometimes written in conversational tone. Now, let us analyze the poem of John Dryden. The name of the poem is MEG-1. MEG-1 is a poem written by John Dryden, where he has used heroic couplets, and MEG-1 is a mock heroic satire. It is a mock heroic satire. He has started mocking Thomas Shadwell. Thomas Shadwell is satirized here. Thomas Shadwell happens to be the rival of John Dryden. He was also a poet. He was the literary rival of John Dryden. So he has tried to underestimate and expose the follies and foibles of Thomas Shadwell. And the structure of MEG-1 is like this. So he has portrayed King Flecknoe as a symbol of dullness. he wants to find a successor for him. So the King Flecknoe, who is the central character here, is portrayed as a dull character. He's a very, inactive, dull, lousy character. He chooses Shadwell as the perfect heir for mediocrity. So King Flecknoe wants to find out a successor for him to succeed to the throne. And Dryden is suggesting that Shadwell will be the best successor for you. Ceremony of coronation becomes a parody of epic tradition. So he makes a parody of coronation. Now, irony and hyperbole are used. Shadwell is the last great prophet of dullness. He describes Shadwell as the prophet of dullness. Then the imagery of decay, banality, dullness are also used. And here you find that Dryden has used and gone to the peak of satirical style. And this poem, MEG-1, showcases the wit of John Dryden and the tremendous control, the tremendous rhetorical power that John Dryden possesses. Now, we'll switch over to the next poem of Alexander Pope, Epistle to Dr. Arbuthnot. This is written in heroic couplet, and this is written as a response to the attacks by critics. That is, Arbuthnot acts as a confidant. Arbuthnot is a friend of Alexander Pope, and he is responding to the response of the critics, the remarks of the critics. It opens with an apology for writing a satire. While Pope begins this poem, he writes with an apology for writing a satire. He said, I'm extremely sorry that I'm writing a satire. Then he also defends the moral integrity and he rejects corrupt patronage. So he says, morality should be given the priority always. And he also discusses many of his rivals. Alexander Pope discusses many of his rivals, such as Buffo, Sporus, etc. And here he tries to make a justification why he is satirizing them. Alexander Pope wants to prove that whatever he says and whatever he does is absolutely right, because these people who are satirized by them, they deserve to be satirized, because they have certain inadequacies, they have certain loopholes which need to be exposed. So this poem is written in epigrammatic style. What is epigrammatic style? Damn with a faint praise. So epigrammatic means which can be quoted later on. If you make a comparison between the satire of Dryden and satire of Pope, you find that both of them are masters of heroic couplets. Nobody is less, nobody is more. Both Dryden and Pope are the great masters of heroic couplets. And they stick to Augustan ideals with classical restraint. Dryden's satire is more direct, whereas Pope's satire is more polished. The satire of Dryden is more direct, it is more combative, and it is political at the literary enemies. Whereas Pope's satire is very polished, very modest, and it is personal with a moral stance. And there is stylistic fineness also. So both of them are great masters of satires. So this is how you find Dryden and Pope, they had made their time, very successful, but their poetry was not very much appreciated by the people of England. As a result, their poetry or their age gave rise to what? It gave rise to Romantic revival movement. The Romantic people or the Romantic poets, they put emphasis on nature, natural landscape. Now we'll switch over to uh, Romantic poets. As I told you, the Romantic revival movement started as a reaction against the Augustan age or the neoclassical age. Why? Why did it start as a reaction? Because the neoclassical poets, they focused on the urban scenario. They neglected the rural setting. They neglected the challenges, the struggle, the strife, the lifestyle of the rustic people, the rural people, people living in the villages. So Dryden and Pope, they thought that their poetry can only deal with the urban lifestyle. And added to that, they wrote their poetry in a very typically technical way. Their poetry was too much technical because they wrote through the technique of heroic couplets. As a result, their theme became very weak. So the readers in Britain, since they are connoisseurs, since they have aesthetic sensibility, they could not show liking, show appreciation for the poetry of Dryden and Pope. And moreover, their poetry was mostly satires. There was no lyric, there was no love poetry, there was no poetry on patriotism, there is no poetry on nature. Rather, their poetry was confined to satire, personal vendetta, revenge on the rival, repartee. So it was not appreciated. So the Romantic revival movement began under the leadership of William Wordsworth. Wordsworth, Byron, Shelley, Keats, and Coleridge, they began to start or spearhead the Romantic revival movement. I have told you how Wordsworth defined poetry as the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings recollected in tranquility. For him, poetry should never be tried. Poetry comes automatically to the mind of a poet. Keats also said, poetry comes as naturally to a poet as the leaves come naturally to a tree. So that's why Wordsworth said poetry should be written in colloquial language, in simple language, lucid language, so that it could be understood by the common readers. Wordsworth also said poetry should sing the glory of nature. Poetry should mention about the glory of nature. Unless glory of nature is being highlighted, poetry cannot be called poetry worth the mention. So in order to make poetry more interesting, in order to make poetry broad-based, one poet needs to focus on nature, emotion, imagination, landscape, beauty of nature, scenic and picturesque beauty, flora and fauna, animals, man, human beings, river, rivulet, mountain, hillocks, etc. Now, Wordsworth advocated for simple poetry. In his preface to Lyrical Ballads, which was published in 1800. He defined poetic diction, I have already told you. A poet should choose incidents and situations from ordinary and common life and throw a color of imagination in such a manner so as to make the ordinary things appear extraordinary and common things appear uncommon. So, this is what created a revolution in the literary parlance. And this definition of poetic diction is widely accepted as one of the most sustainable and most logical, viable definition that has ever been given. And for Wordsworth, nature is not only a mother, nurse, guide, and guardian of all his soul, but according to Wordsworth, nature is the nurse, guide, guardian, and mother of all his moral being. So his entire moral being, whatever he is today, he says it is because of the help of nature. It is because of the blessings of nature. Then we find Coleridge. Coleridge is a collaborator, a co-writer of lyrical ballads. Both of them were good friends and both of them wrote lyrical ballads. He specialized in supernatural and visionary scenes within Romanticism. He focused on supernaturalism. It is said Wordsworth naturalizes the supernatural and Coleridge supernaturalizes the natural. Shelley idealizes the natural. Keats sensualizes the natural. In the 17th century, what was the background? In the 17th century, the background, you know, during the Renaissance we have discussed. There is humanism. Why? There was humanism. There was progress in social life. There was progress in the field of science. There was individualism. There was evolution of patriotism. People began to be patriotic. They loved their own language. They began to champion English and neglect French. French was the official language, so they preferred English language. So in the 17th century, there was social contentment, political stability, scientific advancement, and general peace, for which literature flourished, and people like John Milton, and John Donne, George Herbert, Henry Vaughan, Richard Herrick, Andrew Marvell, they prospered and they began wonderful poetry. You can correlate the social and cultural background of 17th century with that of 16th century Renaissance, because that continues. That legacy continues till the 17th century. Okay. So with Coleridge you find supernaturalism. He also introduced the concept of willing suspension of disbelief. Say, for example, you are watching a movie. In the movie, what happens with AI, artificial intelligence camera? What happens? The hero is, the protagonist is flying on a motorcycle. And that flying on a motorcycle, you have to willingly suspend your disbelief. And you have to believe that for the time being, yes, he is flying. Okay. So, unless you willingly suspend your disbelief, you cannot enjoy art. And he blended imagination with reality. Who? Coleridge. In poems like Kubla Khan, in in poems like Rime of the Ancient Mariner, there is also psychological insight. There is psychological insight and symbolism in Coleridge's poetry. The Coleridge poetry, or the poetry of Coleridge, celebrates guilt, sin, redemption through allegory. Then comes your Shelley. Shelley championed the cause of liberty, equality, human perfection. And for Shelley, poetry was an instrument of moral and social change. In his defense of poetry, he glorified poetry and said, poetry is the only medium which can bring about certain changes in society. He had a revolutionary spirit. He had the pantheistic view of nature. Wordsworth also had the pantheism, the element of pantheism. What is the element of pantheism? To explore the presence of God in the midst of nature. To find the presence of God everywhere. That is called pantheism. So Shelley also had the element of pantheism. And there is musicality in his poem. There is passion in his poem. Then comes your Lord Byron. Lord Byron portrays rebellious spirit in his poetry. His hero or his protagonist is an incarnation of, an embodiment of rebellious spirit. There is mixed romantic individualism with satirical realism. In Byron, you find personal freedom. He champions personal freedom, shows defiance, and makes exotic adventures. In his poem, Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, Don Juan, you find the adventurous spirit. He had a kind of cynical outlook towards the institutions. Who? Byron. Byron had a kind of cynical outlook towards institutions, but still then, he had deep emotional resonance. Then there is romantic individualism with satirical realism. In his poetry, we find exotic adventure, we find wit, irony, and self-reflection. Then comes your Keats, John Keats. John Keats was concerned less with politics, but he was more concerned with beauty, art, transience of life. He developed the idea of negative capability, the ability to dwell in uncertainty without seeking resolution. So negative capability means to dwell in uncertainty without seeking resolution. In whatever position you are, you have to be satisfied with that. Don't aspire for more. He had the element of Hellenism because he was a votary. He was an admirer of the Greek art, Greek literature, Greek sculpture. You find his poems, Ode on a Grecian Horn, Ode to Nightingale. There he has celebrated the element of Hellenism. His poem makes a reflection on morality, beauty, and the permanence of art. He always says, life is temporary, art is permanent. Artist is temporary, art is permanent. Artist is subject to death, decay, and degeneration, but whatever art he has painted, that will remain forever. No one can challenge that. So in Shelley, Byron, and Keats, you find idealism, you find the depiction of beauty, you find the emphasis on heroism and mortality, and in Wordsworth and Coleridge, you find
Hello.
imagination. Yes.
सर
Pankaj Kumar.
आप सर कल्चरल
Yes.
बैकग्राउंड के बारे में बताइए सर आप
Which cultural background?
ब्लॉक 3 पढ़ा रहे हो ना सर आप
अरे भाई सुनो, we have to
Visual
go
art.
very look.
विजुअल
have to-
आर्ट और मैनेजमेंट
अरे भैया, it belongs to 17th century. I
यस
have told you now, this is continuation of Renaissance tradition. And this is romantic age I am teaching you. In romantic age also the background I told you. The people were disgusted with Dryden and Pope, for which the romantic revival movement started.
Sir, which is the block 3? Block 6?
I don't know the block. You find out. This is in your course. That block
Sir,
I am
block
not.
wise?
Yes,
Sir, please
yes.
teach us block wise.
It belongs to some block. You find out. This may be block 6 or 7. Okay. You just find out. I have checked it. This belongs to 6 or 7 like that. Okay. This is romantic age I am
Sir,
teaching you.
रोमांटिक है सर ब्लॉक 6 में अभी ब्लॉक 3 2 कंप्लीट हुआ था अभी ब्लॉक 6 पे चले गए सर
अरे ब्लॉक 3 को नहीं किया कंप्लीट? ब्लॉक 3 नहीं पढ़ाया? ब्लॉक 3 में क्या है?
मैथाफिजिकल फ्लूइड डॉन और फॉरवर्ड के बारे में है सर ये
हाँ तो पढ़ाया ना अभी?
यस सर उसके बाद स्टडी है स्टडी मिल्टन कहाँ गया सर
क्या मिल्टन पढ़ाया ना? लालेग्रो इल्पेंसरोसो?
और
क्या
नॉन
कर रहे हो
क्लासिकल पोएट
तुम सो रहे थे?
नॉन क्लासिकल पोएट और ड्राइडन और पॉप
Dryden and Pope. अरे सुनो, I taught you metaphysical poets. I taught you Spencer's Fairy Queen, Spencer's Shepherd's Calendar. I taught you metaphysical poets George Herbert Spulley, and spoke about John Donne and others. Then we talked about Milton, L'Allegro, Il Penseroso. Then we switched over to Dryden and Pope, MacFlecknoe
Okay.
and Dr. Arbuthnot. Now we are studying Romantic Age. What is the problem? All the blocks are covered. You ask your friends. I don't know whether you are there or not.
सर आई आस्क ऑलरेडी which the book which is the block on which today class is discussed now to block 2
I said block 2.
someone has replied it is block 2
No,
then
no.
I have searched for block 3
Look. Pankaj, are you interested in knowing the blocks or knowing the study materials? You should be interested to know the study materials, study areas. So those blocks are covered, and you have to find out which block I am teaching. I am teaching now romantic poetry, and romantic poetry is coming to an end. We have to move a little faster because tomorrow is my last class. Why don't you understand that? I have to cover 2 more ages, Victorian age and modern age. Okay. So that's why I was a little faster today. Tomorrow, not tomorrow, on 4th. 4th is my last class. Okay.
okay sir
That is the reason why I am moving a little
after fourth
faster.
class British poetry is complete
Eh?
after fourth class British poetry is complete
This is not 4th class, this is 5th class. This is
yes sir
6th class. Sorry, 7th
So-
class. This is 7th
After-
class.
yes sir after 1 or 2 class British poetry is complete
Yes. British poetry will be complete. This is what your IGNO RC Bhubaneswar has chalked out the plan. I have not chalked out. So you talk to RC Bhubaneswar, Pankaj.
यस ये तो सेल्फ स्टडी करनी पड़ेगी सर यहाँ से काम नहीं चलेगा सर अपना
ये तो आपका है ये.
यस सर सेल्फ स्टडी करनी पड़ेगी सर ऐसे कुछ पता नहीं चलेगा
Okay.
Sir, sorry to interrupt you. I had a question. Hello. Sir, as far we know that these lectures are being recorded. In future, if we want to listen these lectures, or how can I retrieve this recording?
I don't know. You have to talk to RC Bhubaneswar.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Actually, I have no
This
idea
was-
about
this
those.
is okay. This is my question to all of you. If any one of you can say this, how can I retrieve this recording, or how can I get the recording? It will be very useful for me. Okay.
You can contact RC Bhubaneswar, I believe. I have no idea actually. What is the procedure?
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So, are you now clear about the Romantic age? In the Romantic age, I told you there are brilliant poets like Wordsworth, Shelley, Byron, Keats, and Coleridge. But Wordsworth and Coleridge, they belong to the first generation of poets. They spearheaded the Romantic revival movement. Coleridge was a collaborator, a friend, guide, and philosopher of Wordsworth. Even both of them together, they wrote lyrical ballads. So much so that the preface became very long, and after writing preface, when it was given to Coleridge, Coleridge gave a suggestion, you cut it short. This is too long. You have to shortcut it, cut it short. And he did that. So much of respect he was having for Coleridge. So Wordsworth and Coleridge, they belong to the first, phase of Romantic age. Then in the second phase came Shelley, Keats,
Sir,
and
please
Byron.
tell about William Blake,
As I told,
romantic poem. Sir, please tell
sorry,
about William Blake.
sorry,
William Blake.
William Blake. William Blake belongs to pre-Romantic age in the first phase. In the first
Yes, sir.
phase, do you have Blake in your course?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'll tell you
Please
about
tell
Blake.
me.
Okay. Now I'm telling. Blake belongs to the first phase, the pre-romantic
Yes.
phase. As I told you, Robert Burns, George Grabe, Robert Southey, William Blake, they belong to the pre-romantic age or the first phase of romantic age. And William Blake was a philosophical poet. He was also a lover of nature, and along with that, he used to, you know, write about the creation of God. He had a kind of what you call divine faith, and you have, if you have read his poem Tiger, Tiger, burning bright. So he has expressed his wonder ki how God has created the tiger. The same God has created a lamb. Ki God, you are so very wonderful. You are so very mysterious. You could kill you could make a tiger as well as you could make a lamb. So he is a legendary poet. He was also a painter and he was a poet. He had two types of poetry. Remember, William Blake used to write, Pankaj, mute your microphone. He had two types of poetry. One is the Song of Innocence and the Song of Experience. In the Song of Innocence, he writes about, you know, how innocent qualities are to be appreciated. And in Songs of Experience, he talks about the maturity of human beings. Okay. In his poetry, we find a deeper philosophy on the meaning of life. He talks about uh, how God has created the lamb, who is the embodiment of innocence, and the tiger, who is an embodiment of violence, aggression. And by that way, he has started praising God. Oh God, you have such mysterious qualities which I can never believe that this is possible through your poetry, through your creation. You have been so meticulous in painting two types of divergent antagonistic characters. And the songs of innocence also deal with childlike purity, honesty, innocence, joy. I told you he writes two types of poems. One is Song of Innocence and the other is Song of Experience. In the Song of Innocence, you find the portrayal of childlike purity, joy, honesty, innocence, harmony, divine harmony, etc. And in Song of Experience, you find the elements of corruption, repression, hypocrisy, falsehood, betrayal, revenge, envy, hatred, all kinds of vices. And the poem Tiger, the Tiger, the spelling of tiger by written by Blake is Tyger. He doesn't write Tiger. He writes Tyger. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. So the tiger questions divine creation in a world of violence. He says, you are creating a lamb, you are creating a violent animal like tiger. And this is a contrary state of affairs. So together they form two contrary states of the human soul. So through the poem of Tiger, in an allegorical fashion, he has tried to indicate that innocence and experience are necessary for spiritual growth. And human beings have two dimensions. Human beings have innocence as well as they have aggressiveness. They have the bitter feelings. And there is also in Song of Innocence, there you find that good and evil are portrayed vis-a-vis, side by side, to indicate that unless evil is there, you cannot recognize what is good. In order to recognize what is good, you have to know what is evil. If there is no darkness, you cannot know that this is light. If there is no dishonesty, you cannot know that this is honesty. So that is what Blake has been trying to, refer to in his poems. And as far as his poems are concerned, he uses a number of imagery and symbolism. His poetry is full of symbolism. As you find, lamb is a symbol of innocence, divine love. Tiger is a symbol of destruction, symbol of divine mystery. Light is a symbol, dark is a symbol. Light symbolizes knowledge, dark symbolizes ignorance. Chain is a symbol. Chain talks about oppression, restraint, control, and cities are also symbols. Cities talk about corruption. In his poetry, garden is a symbol. In garden we find purity, Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve were living, and Eve wanted to have the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge, for which they became mortal. I have told you. Then there is visual art. It's a revolutionary fusion of poetry with symbolism, imagery. In Blake's poetry, we find rhythms, simplicity of language, biblical diction. We also come across parallelism. We find contrast. Philosophical insights are portrayed in Blake's poetry. This is very important. There is political outlook. Blake doesn't believe in organized religion, especially the rigidity of the church. Blake disapproved of the rigid principles of the church. Blake advocated for freedom of thought, sexual liberation, social justice. He wanted sexual liberation. There should not be any gender discrimination. The discrimination between male and female. Equal status, equal opportunity should be offered to the female as it is offered to the male. There is a vision of liberation, and he feels a social justice should always be there. People should be given social justice so that they can have a comfortable and hassle-free life. He is sometimes called a mystical poet. Critics like Northrop Frye, they call William Blake as a mystical poet. Harold Bloom calls him the Columbus of the psyche. He makes exploration at the psychological level. In his poetry, we find the fusion of four things. Remember, in Blake's poetry, we find the fusion of four elements. One is myth, second is religion, third is art, and fourth is radical revolutionary thought. So myth, religion, art, radical thought. And he always gave his arguments, put forward his arguments for the
Sir, could you
liberation
please
of the
repeat?
human spirit
Sir,
through
can you please
imagination.
repeat the first element of that
Myth.
Blake's post?
First
Hanji?
element is myth.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Second is religion, I repeat. Third is art. Fourth
Okay,
is radical thought.
thank you.
Sir, in book four level
He,
of meanings, sir,
Pankaj?
sir, black poetry, four level of meanings are literal, moral,
Four levels of meaning I told you na. He writes two types of poetry, songs of innocence, songs of
allegorical,
experience.
or
And the four levels of meaning you can find through myth, religion, art, radical thought.
yes, sir.
Okay. These are the four levels that he discusses his poetry. Okay. Okay. So now Blake is covered. We'll switch over to Browning, Victorian poetry.
Sir, what is the black revolutionary view?
Black,
Revolutionary view.
Blake's revolutionary view
Yes,
is
sir.
not black, Blake. Blake had a revolutionary view
Yes.
who always wanted liberation of human beings. He wanted that literature is the only medium which can liberate the human beings. Literature is the medium through which you can express your views freely. He wanted freedom of thought. He did not want the restraint of the church. He did not want the control of the church over society. Okay. So he always wanted the liberation of human spirit. That is the revolutionary thought. He did not want to stick to or succumb to the established norms of society. He wanted to exercise his free will. That is his revolutionary thought. Okay. Now, I have told you, Pankaj, mute yourself. Now I have told you how 19th century has witnessed three types of poetry. Remember, recall, I have already discussed it with you. The first part of 19th century dealt with the pre-romantic poets like Robert Burns, George Crabbe, Robert Southey, William Blake, etc. Second phase of 19th century or the middle part of 19th century covered poets like Wordsworth, Coleridge, Byron, Shelley, and Keats. Now, the last part of 19th century covers the Victorian age. Who are the Victorian poets? Lord Tennyson, Robert Browning, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Christina Rossetti, pre-Raphaelite poets, Andrew Marvell, your Matthew Arnold, Andrew Marvell belongs to metaphysical age. Matthew Arnold, A.C. Swinburne, they are the Victorian poets. So,
Two poem from man and woman. मैम
Sorry?
सर इस टॉपिक के बारे में बताइए.
किसके
Two
बारे में?
poem from man and woman.
Poem
Two
from?
poem from man and woman.
ओके, पोएम फ्रॉम मैन एंड वुमन. ओके, नहीं, और पहले बैकग्राउंड तो मुझे बोलने दो. The background of Victorian poetry. So Victorian period roughly started from 1837 to 1901, because at that time Queen Victoria was reigning over England. And if you go through the so everybody has gone. So this is how Queen Victoria's period is known as the Victorian period, and during this period poetry witnessed great progress. There was great growth of poetry, commendable growth of poetry, and the chief characteristics of Victorian poetry we should discuss. What are the main characteristics of Victorian poetry? If you go through Victorian poetry in a very serious manner, in an impartial and objective manner, in an insightful manner, you will notice that there is a kind of moral vision. There is a kind of social implication. There is a kind of reformative zeal, because that was a period which you may call a very typical period of transition. Why I call it transition? Because social superstitions are withering away. Science is becoming stronger. People are getting away from dogmas, hypotheses. They don't believe in dogmas. They want practical record. And science believes in practical experiment. Science believes in three things: experiment, observation, and conclusion. Now, in Victorian age, there was a conflict between religious mysticism and scientific temper. However, the poets began to surpass all these things. How did they surpass? They wanted to surpass this kind of conflict, because they wanted that man should be rational, man should be sensible, man should know what is the difference between theory and practice. So there was the conflict between faith based on superstition and doubt. Industrialization has already started. As a result, poets like Tennyson and Browning, they reflected realism in their poetry. They used imagination, no doubt, but along with imagination, they also used their intellect. And when they used their intellect, they noticed that they are in a position to do something for the society. How can they do something for the society? They found that poetry is going to be a very powerful medium to bring about some changes in the society. What kind of changes did they desire? Because they knew people were subjected to superstitions. They were believing in dogmas, hypotheses, social superstitions. But now they have outgrown, they have come out of their cocoon, and now they believe that they must trust science. How do they trust science? They would trust science only when they
Sir, I have a
remove the
question.
dogma, they distrust the superstitions, they throw out the hypotheses and the theories. So this is how the Victorian poets wanted to prove their mettle through their poetry. And their poetry proved to be very relevant because it subscribed to the needs of the people, the requirements of the people. Whatever the people wanted to get, they got it through Victorian poetry. Tennyson wrote Lotus Eaters. Tennyson wrote In Memoriam. Porphyria. Porphyria, whatever is in your course, we will discuss that. Two early poems of Robert Browning and two poems from Men and Women. Two early poems of Robert Browning and two poems from Men and Women. That means, okay. So, is the name of the poem given? No. Name of the poem is not given, no? So Robert Browning was a very optimistic poet. He never used to show any kind of cynical outlook. And he was a champion of dramatic monologue. And this Men and Women is a dramatic monologue also. It is a collection of dramatic monologues. There you find 51 dramatic monologues have been put together, not one or two. 51 dramatic monologues, each exploring a complex psychology, love, art, and morality. So Browning develop the dramatic monologue. What is a monologue? That is my last duchess. His wife was murdered in My Last Duchess. She used to murder his wife, and put his statue. The poem is My Last Duchess. But this Men and Women was written in 1855, and this is a collection of 51 dramatic monologues. Each monologue. Yes, I was asking you what is a monologue. A monologue is a kind of one man's conversation. Dialogue is the conversation between two persons. Monologue, where one man starts talking or presenting his views, narrating something, communicating to you something. You can take two poems, two representative poems from Men and Women. One is Pra Lipo Lipi. The third is Andrea del Sato. In Pra Lipo Lipi, the theme is a beautiful theme. The theme deals with art, religion, realism. The theme of Pra Lipo Lipi celebrates the elements of art, religion, and realism. In this poem, the speaker, Fra Lipo Lipi, is a painter, is a 15th century painter, and actually he is portrayed in 19th century, last part of 19th century, so he becomes a historical figure, and he defends his realistic art style always. He says that whatever style I have adopted, Fra Lipo Lipi says, who was a 15th century painter, he doesn't accept or approve of any change in his painting style. He said, whatever style of painting I have adopted, that is the best style. I can't make any compromise with my technique, with my style. So if you are an artist doesn't make any compromise with his original style. And a good artist is he who doesn't imitate the art of others, the painting of others. He always wants his painting, his art is unique. His presentation is unique. His style is most commendable because in his own perception he finds it is very good. In his own perception, if he finds it is very good, he doesn't need to change it. So Fra Lipo Lipi, the painter of 15th century, he goes all out, all the way, in order to defend his artistic style. And he says, my style of painting represents reality in the best possible form. I don't need to take inspiration from others. This is my own style, and I stand by it. So here you find Robert Browning has been using Lipo's voice, Fra Lipo Lipi's voice, to argue that art should present reality. I'll take you back to Plato's observation on art. Plato wanted to banish the poets and artists from his republic, saying that they are liars. They depend on imagination. and art is twice removed from reality. But Aristotle contested it, challenged it. He said, the art is never twice removed from reality. It is the representation of reality. Art is the manifestation of reality. Similarly, Fra Lippo says, that art is the representation of reality. And the basic job of art or painting is to represent the reality, manifest the reality, replicate the reality. And life should be shown in a truthful manner. Life should be shown in a truthful manner, honest manner through art. So this poem, Pra Lippo is full of wit, humor, morality, and the coloring of Renaissance imagination, the classical imagination. This is a brilliant poem where Pra Lippo has been trying all the way how art is indispensable and how art represents reality. Art can never be compromised. The elements of art can never be compromised. One should realize the importance of art and how does art focus on reality in a truthful, honest, unbiased, objective, dispassionate, impartial manner. Artist is detached from the reality. Whatever he finds, he paints it. Whatever he notices, he paints it. He doesn't, modify it. He simply presents the reality on the canvas. So as the 15th century painter, Fra Lippo has been trying to stand by in a very strong manner to represent his ethics that art should represent reality in the perfect manner. It should be the representation, manifestation, presentation of reality. We'll stop it here. On our last class, thank you very much. We'll stop it here. Thanks. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bye, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.